The first time I heard my son call my market share pocket money, I was carrying a crate of tomatoes he had not helped pick. He showed Mara Chen the transfer on his phone. It was $184 short. I stood there with the crate against my chest and wondered when our partnership had become his kindness. Then I set the tomatoes down and asked him to go through that day's harvest, sales, booth fee, and our agreed split before either of us left. Evan gave me the patient smile people use when they want calm to look like confusion. "Dad, it is 6 in the morning. Can we not do family bookkeeping in the road?" "It became family bookkeeping when you changed the number." Mara had already turned back to the weights on her tent. I was grateful for that. I did not want an audience, I wanted an answer. Evan lifted the crate I had put down and carried it beneath our green canopy. "We had expenses." "Which ones?" "I will show you later." That word had covered a great deal between us. Later had covered fuel, spoiled lettuce, a card reader that stopped working, and 3 Sundays when Evan said he would help repair the wash table and did not come. Usually I accepted it because Saturday customers were already moving between the tents, and vegetables do not pause while families find the right language. This time I followed him into the booth. Lena Ortiz, who coordinated Cedar Row, was making her first walk down the aisle. She checked that every tent was weighted, every vehicle was out of the loading lane, and every booth tag matched the people selling beneath it. Ours said, "Holloway Produce, Daniel Holloway, Evan Holloway." Both names had been there since we applied together 2 summers earlier. Lena tapped the tag with one finger. "Both here. Good. Remember, initials on paid holds. Whoever takes it either fills it or returns it. Thursday meeting if there is anything pending for next week." She said the same thing to every shared booth. Cedar Row did not settle private arguments. It kept track of who had promised what under its roof. At the table across from us, Cal Brooks was stacking empty baskets beside the rotating growers sign. That table changed hands from week to week. 2 regular vendors had to sponsor whoever used it, and the guest had to take a share of setup and cleanup. It was not charity space. It was how smaller growers covered gaps in the market without pretending one farm had grown everything on the table. Lena looked again at our joint tag. "Renewal sheets are in your folder. Same rule as always. Joint space stays joint. If one partner separates, it closes after the current market. Neither name inherits it." "We know," Evan said. He said it quickly, already reaching for his phone as if rules were background noise. I took 4 blank paper labels from the roll by the card reader. Mrs. Bell had asked me for 2 flats of tomatoes for the church pantry. Darius Reed, who ran a small deli near the courthouse, wanted 2 crates of cucumbers if the Friday picking held. I wrote their initials and my own on the labels. Evan watched me tie them to the crate handles. "What are you doing?" "Marking the orders I took." "That makes us look divided." "Then let us agree on the promises before we make them." His phone rang. I heard him change his voice before he answered. He used a brisker tone for restaurant buyers, a tone that made our 12-acre place sound as though trucks departed from it every hour. "Yes, Nia," he said. "We can probably increase that next Saturday." He walked toward the end of the booth where I could not hear the quantity. By the opening bell, the money question had changed shape. The missing $184 still mattered. It paid my electric bill and some of the diesel for the irrigation pump. But the labels in front of me raised a harder question. If Evan could decide what my labor was worth after the sale, what else did he believe he could promise before the harvest? Customers came in their usual waves. A woman bought 3 bell peppers and asked whether the red ones were sweeter. 2 boys counted out market tokens for green beans. Mara called across that she had 1 bunch of basil left, and I sent a customer to her. Under the tents, talk moved faster than the line. 2 pounds, 1 bunch, keep the change, rain tonight, see you next week. Evan was good at that part. He remembered names, complimented recipes, and could make a crooked zucchini feel chosen. That was one reason our arrangement had worked at first. 2 years earlier, He had customers and not enough produce. I had produce and little interest in standing beneath a canopy talking for 6 hours. After my wife Helen died, I had reduced the farm to what I could manage alone. Evan came home from the city with plans for a food delivery business that had not survived its first winter. He asked whether we could try one season together. The first season, the arrangement gave each of us back something we had lost. Evan brought laughter into the wash shed and taught me how to send a payment link without calling it a contraption. I taught him to leave pale tomatoes on the vine, even when an empty market basket made him nervous. He could remember that a customer named Alice wanted small zucchini, not large ones. I could look at a row on Wednesday and tell him how cautiously to speak about Saturday. We argued then too, but the argument still ended in decisions. If he wanted to discount peppers during the last hour, he asked. If I needed to pull a cucumber crate because the fruit was soft, I told him before he offered it. On our best mornings, I loaded while he unfolded the tables, and neither of us had to explain where the other man's hands belonged. We wrote the split at my kitchen table. 45% of net market sales to me, 55% to him. His larger share covered the hours he spent taking orders, running the card reader, and building the customer list. Mine paid for the crop and the work that did not show beneath the tent. Seeding, watering, tying vines, picking, washing, sorting, and loading before dawn. I did not resent his 55. I had agreed to it. What I resented was watching an agreement turn into an allowance without anybody asking me. After the market, we carried unsold peppers into the wash shed. Evan kept checking the time. He had arranged to meet Nia Patel, the buyer for a restaurant called Juniper Street Kitchen. I put the handwritten sales sheet on the sorting table. It showed card totals, cash, market tokens, the booth fee, and my harvest count. We had always kept one because memory becomes generous when money is tired. "Show me the extra expense," I said. Evan set down a pepper box. "I had to replace 2 tent straps and there was the promotion." "What promotion?" "Online, for the restaurant side. That was your idea. We never agreed it came out before the split." He rubbed both hands over his face. "This is what I mean. I am trying to grow something, and you want to count straps? I want the number we agreed on. You got money." The sentence was quiet. That made it worse. I looked at the open line on the sheet. For years I had supplied the answer whenever Evan left a blank. I would estimate the missing cash, absorb a spoiled crate, or remember that he had bought ice. That afternoon I wrote my harvest total beside the sales number and left the disputed amount open. "You can put the explanation there when you have it," I said. He took the restaurant quantity out of the upcoming column and folded the corner of the sheet over it. "Nia needs an answer today." "Then answer from produce that is not already promised. It is all our produce. It is all produce from our booth. That does not make every promise yours to move." He left without finishing the sheet. On Tuesday morning, I walked the tomato rows before the heat gathered under the leaves. The slicers were coming on well, but not evenly. Some shoulders were still green. A hard rain had split several of the ripest ones. The cucumbers were worse. The vines were healthy, but the cool nights had slowed the second picking. I called Mrs. Bell from the end of the row. "I can promise 2 flats," I told her, "not 3. 2 is enough if I add beans," she said. "Can I collect at 9? I wrote Bell 2, DH on 2 labels and told her the pickup time. Darius answered while I was washing soil from the first cucumbers. "I can hold 2 crates if Friday looks like this," I said. "If it changes, I will call you before you leave the deli." "That works," he said. "I would rather know than arrive hopeful." I wrote Read 2, DH. Evan came into the shed as I tied the last label. He stared at the 4 marked crates as if I had painted a line down the middle of the floor. "You called them without me?" "They called me. I answered for what I can fill." "Nia wants 12 flats of tomatoes and 8 cucumber crates." I thought I had misheard him. This week? Saturday. If it goes well, she will order every week through fall. We do not have 20 units after these 4. We have another picking. We have a possible picking. He leaned against the wash table. Regulars understand farms. A restaurant needs certainty. Certainty is the one thing you cannot give her from an unpicked row. This account could cover my truck payment. There it was. Not an excuse, but a pressure I could understand. Evan had bought the truck when his delivery business was doing well. After it failed, the payment remained. The restaurant account was not only vanity, it looked to him like a way to stop feeling as though he had returned to his father's farm after losing something of his own. He had never said that plainly. Instead, he talked about scale, visibility, and becoming a supplier instead of a man at a folding table. I knew the shame beneath those words, because I had heard relatives ask how his company was going long after the company was gone. I also knew shame could make a person hurry past any fact that threatened the next version of himself. I want you to get the account, I said. I want you to promise a number we can put in the truck. Those are the same thing. They are only the same if the crop agrees. I pulled the renewal folder from the shelf. We can keep one promise list and approve it together, or we can keep separate lists and separate stock. I will do either. Separate labels make me look like I work for you. They have my initials. Exactly. I opened the cedar row sheet and pointed to the paragraph we had both read when we joined. If either named partner separated, the joint space closed after the current market. There was no changing the tag to one name in the middle of the season. No favorite son, no senior partner, no inheritance. If we cannot agree on promises, I said, the booth is at risk for both of us. You would give up our space over 4 labels? No, I am asking you not to give up our promises for one account. He looked through the open shed door at the wet cucumber rows. Fine, keep your labels, but the booth stays joint. It sounded like a compromise until I understood that he meant the risk could stay joint too. At noon the next day, he called from the receiving door behind Juniper Street Kitchen. Metal carts rattled behind him. Nia needs the final number now, he said. Tell her what is unreserved. She will go elsewhere. Then she needs to go elsewhere before Saturday, not after. 12 and 8 is not unreasonable. It includes the Bell and Reed crates. It includes the farm. Nia spoke in the background. I could not hear the words. Evan covered the phone, then came back. I am confirming it. Do not use my 4 holds in your count. I heard you. He hung up. Friday began at 4:30 under a low gray sky. I picked with a headlamp until there was enough light to see color. Evan arrived at 6, 40 minutes later than he had said. We worked opposite sides of the tomato row, setting marketable fruit into shallow flats and split fruit into a bucket for the house. By 8, the count was plain. We had my 2 tomato flats for Mrs. Bell, 2 cucumber crates for Darius, 10 more tomato flats, and 5 more cucumber crates. There were peppers, beans, and zucchini for the table, but they could not become the produce Evan had promised. Even without the cool week, his numbers had depended on counting the same 4 crates twice. At the wash station, he reached for Mrs. Bell's label. We can give her 1 flat and replace it next week. I put my hand over the knot. Call her and ask. You call her. It is not my restaurant order. It is our reputation. Then do not improve it by breaking a promise quietly. He dropped his hand. We loaded the 4 labeled crates on the left side of the truck and every unlabeled crate on the right. I did not hide a tomato from him. I did not claim the whole harvest because I had grown it. I gave him every unpromised unit we had. He counted the right side twice. We will look small, he said. We are small. He shut the truck door harder than he needed to. The next morning, the market smelled of wet canvas and basil. A breeze moved through the loading lane, and vendors held one hand on their signs while they carried boxes with the other. We set the peppers in sloping baskets, beans in blue trays, zucchini along the front edge. I put the 4 labeled crates behind the table, where customers could see that they were held. For the first hour, the walk-up sales were steady. 2 tomato flats went to people making sauce. We sold nearly all the beans. Evan kept glancing toward the lane for Nia's van. A caterer I did not know stopped at the end of our booth. She needed a full flat of tomatoes for an afternoon event. "Those are reserved," I said when she pointed behind the table. Evan stepped beside me. "We can spare one." "We cannot." He lowered his voice. "We need the sale." "Mrs. Bell will be here at 9. Then give her the next picking. She needs them today." The caterer looked from one of us to the other. "I can keep looking." "No," Evan said. "We have them." He lifted one of the Bell flats, cut the paper label from the handle, and set it on the scale. Then he rang the sale under his initials. He did not do it in confusion. He did it after I said no, after he saw the name, and after the buyer offered him a way out. Mara was arranging jars across the aisle. She looked up when the label fell near Evan's shoe, then looked back at her work. She did not need to become my witness. I had watched the choice myself. The caterer paid and carried the flat away. "Put it back," I said, though it was already gone. "I just made us $72. You sold Mrs. Bell's tomatoes." "They are tomatoes, Dad. They do not know whose name was on the paper." "Mrs. Bell does." He turned to greet the next customer. For a few seconds I wanted to leave the booth. I wanted him to feel the whole weight of the table, the card reader, the questions, the restaurant van that had not yet arrived. But leaving would have abandoned Darius and Mrs. Bell along with him. So I stepped behind the canopy and called them. Mrs. Bell answered on the second ring. "I have 1 flat for you, not 2, I said. "One of the held flats was sold. You can take the one at half the amount you paid, or I can return the full payment now." There was a pause. "Was it the rain?" she asked. I looked through the gap in the tent at Evan. "The harvest was short, but I had your 2 flats when we arrived. One was sold after that." "I see. I am sorry. Keep one for me. I will add beans like I said." I returned half her payment and sent her the new total. Then I messaged Darius that his 2 cucumber crates were still held and ready. Evan came behind the tent while I was putting my phone away. "Why would you tell her that?" "Because it happened. You could have said weather. Weather did not carry her flat to the scale." He crossed his arms. "Send one message to everyone. Tell them the picking was light and we will make it right next week." "I have answered the people I promised. You answer Nia." This is exactly how small businesses fail, everybody protecting their little piece. Lena passed with her clipboard and stopped when she heard his voice. She did not ask what kind of father I was or which of us deserved the farm. She looked at the cut label on the ground. "Is there a paid hold pending?" "Mrs. Bell accepted a partial and I returned the other half," I said. "Darius is intact." "Restaurant pickup?" Evan said, "We are handling it." Lena wrote 1 line. "If either of you requests separation, list every pending order at Thursday allocation. No one applies for another Cedar Row space until their own holds are named." Then she continued down the aisle. At 8:40, Nia arrived earlier than Evan expected. She brought 2 folding carts and a young kitchen employee. She looked at the table, then at the crates behind it. 12 tomato, 8 cucumber, she said. "Where do you want us to start?" Evan showed her the 10 unlabeled tomato flats and 5 cucumber crates. "This is the first load. We had a weather issue, but I can add those." He pointed to Mrs. Bell's remaining tomatoes and Darius's cucumbers. I moved beside the labels. "Those 3 are paid holds I accepted." Nia frowned. "Are they part of my 20? "Evan will need to answer that." He stared at me. "If you give me the cucumbers, Darius can take next week." "Darius is driving here now." "Nia is standing here now, and you promised both." Nia folded her invoice in half. "Evan, Did your confirmed count include reserve stock? We share inventory. That is not what I asked. Mrs. Bell arrived then, carrying 2 flattened boxes in case I had loose tomatoes. She did not demand a scene. She looked at her one remaining flat, checked the label, and waited while I helped the customer in front of her. I completed her reduced order. I carried Darius's 2 cucumber crates to the curb when his van arrived. I did not touch the unreserved stock on Evan's side, even when Nia said she would take whatever he could provide. Evan supplied 10 tomato flats and 5 cucumber crates. He returned the difference on Nia's payment from his phone. She accepted the partial order because her kitchen needed something, but she told him she would not schedule weekly quantities until he could confirm whose stock he was offering. Nobody applauded. The market kept moving. A customer asked me the price of zucchini while my son watched the restaurant carts roll away with less than he had promised. That was the moment the dispute stopped being mainly about $184. A wrong transfer could be corrected. An expense could be argued and written down. But Evan had used the same cucumbers to answer 2 people and expected the person standing closest to disappointment to carry it for him. When the rush ended, he pushed the card reader across the table. If that account is gone, everybody here will know why. They will know you promised 20 and had 15. We had 18. 3 belonged to paid holds. There, that word, belonged. You are turning vegetables into property lines against your own son. I looked at the empty place where Mrs. Bell's second flat had been. I am turning my yes into something a person can rely on. He laughed once, with no humor in it, and went to help a customer. At closing, I swept beneath our table and stacked the empty trays. Evan handled the cash box without speaking to me. Across the aisle, Cal and Mara were folding the rotating table. One of its growers had left early to collect a child, so Mara was covering the last of his sales. I carried Cal's folded legs to the storage rack after our own space was clean. "Those labels yours?" Mara asked. The promises were. She waited, but I did not explain the transfer or ask her to decide who had embarrassed whom. Cal tightened a strap around the folded table. "If you ever apply for a rotating week, 2 of us sponsor the amount you bring. Setup, selling cover, cleanup, separate totals." "I know." "Next Saturday is full," he said. "After that, changes every week." It was not an invitation. It was information, and the distinction mattered. When I returned to our booth, the wooden joint tag was gone from the cash box. "Where's the tag?" I asked Evan. "With me. It belongs in the folder. I am not leaving it where somebody can decide we are finished. A tag cannot keep us together." He lifted the last pepper crate and walked toward his truck. On Monday evening, he came to my kitchen with his phone open. The $184 glowed on the screen, ready to send. "I will put it back," he said. "We stop the separate label nonsense. Use next Saturday to make Nia whole, and this goes away." I had spent Sunday calculating what missing a Cedar Row week would cost. The tomatoes would not wait for my principles. Farmgate traffic was thin. A produce auction 2 counties away would pay less than the market. I had enough saved for the electric bill, but not enough to pretend the loss would be painless. "The money does not make your 2 promises into one," I said. "So you do not want it?" "I want the split we agreed on. I do not want repayment used as permission to do this again." He sat across from me at the table where we had written the partnership 2 years earlier. "What do you want then?" "Separate orders, separate stock, separate sales." "And the booth?" "The rule is clear. You would make both of us lose it. I am choosing to lose my part because I cannot keep lending it to promises I did not make." He looked around the kitchen then, at the old pine cabinets, the stack of market towels by the door, the calendar where I had written Cedar Row in every Saturday square through October. Losing the booth was not an abstract penalty. It meant tomatoes ripening without our strongest stream of customers. It meant I would spend the next week asking where they could go and accepting less when the answer came late. Evan knew that. For a moment his anger changed into something closer to alarm. "You cannot move this crop from the gate," he said. "Probably not all of it." "Then you are hurting yourself to prove a point." "No. I am accepting the cost of ending an arrangement I helped build." He pushed back from the table. "You always do this. You wait until you can make sacrifice look noble." The words found a tender place because there was some truth near them. I had spent years doing work without saying what it cost, then feeling hurt when nobody measured it correctly. Silence had made me useful, but it had not made me clear. "I should have spoken sooner," I said. "I am speaking now." The next morning I took the separation form to Lena's office beside the market storage shed. She read my name, then slid the paper back far enough for me to read the sentence above the signature. "You understand this closes the joint allocation," she said. "It does not transfer it to you." "I understand." "There is no open solo space next Saturday." "I understand that too," I signed. Lena scheduled the Thursday meeting. Its purpose was plain. List the orders each person still owed, settle the next market fee, return the joint tag, and decide whether either application could be considered later. Cedar Row was not going to tell Evan he had mistreated his father. It was going to ask what he had promised customers under a booth carrying both our names. Thursday afternoon, the market aisle was empty. Folded tables leaned against the wall, and the air inside the storage office smelled faintly of cardboard and onions. Lena sat at one end of a narrow table. Cal was there because the rotating growers used some of the same limited spaces. Evan arrived with the wooden tag in his hand. He put it on the table between us. Lena began with him. "Pending paid orders?" "Nia's restaurant order," he said. "I returned the short portion, but I told her I would add a make-good next market." "Quantity?" "3 cucumber crates and 2 tomato flats." "Any others?" "Mrs. Bell's missing flat." I looked at him. I returned half her payment. She accepted the reduced order. Evan shook his head. "You made that decision. I sold the flat, so I was going to replace it." Lena kept her pen still. "Then are you naming it as your pending promise?" "If I have the booth, yes." "The joint booth closes. What stock are you using for the restaurant make-good?" "The farm's next picking." "Who's accepted inventory?" "It is our farm inventory." "Daniel filed separation. Is he agreeing to supply it?" Evan turned toward me. "Are you really going to make me answer that?" "Yes," I said. He faced Lena again. "I can bring the tomatoes and cucumbers, put them on the regular table, and sell walk-up stock around the order. I only need Daniel's half of the fee covered for the first week." "There is no regular table attached to this tag after separation," Lena said. "And the same crates cannot be reserved for a make-good and offered as walk-up inventory." "I know how to sell produce." "I am asking how you are allocating those 5 units." "I will decide based on traffic." "Then they are not reserved for Nia." He exhaled sharply. "This is what happens when you turn a family arrangement into paperwork. My father grows. I sell. I handle the money. He gets his share whether the week is good or bad." "Pocket money?" Cal asked quietly. Evan looked at him, then at me. "That is not what I meant." I had not told Cal the phrase. Mara must have heard more in the loading lane than I realized, or perhaps Evan had used it more than once. But I did not need Cal's question. Evan kept talking. "He is not carrying the overhead," he said. "I am the one trying to build accounts. If I have to protect every crate he puts a label on, there is no flexibility." Lena said, "Did you sell a paid hold with Daniel's initials?" "I made a sale from our booth." Did you take responsibility for replacing or refunding it? He refunded it before I could. And now you are asking him to supply your make good, pay part of a fee for a booth that no longer exists, and leave that same produce available for walk-up sales? Evan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at the tag. There was no confession. He did not say he had been wrong. He did not suddenly understand my dawns in the field. He simply reached the end of the promises he had made and found that they could not all occupy the same crate. Lena turned to me. Daniel, pending paid orders? None. Mrs. Bell accepted one flat and received half back. Darius received both cucumber crates. Next market fee? I will pay the half due from the completed joint market. I am not paying toward a future space. Do you understand you have no Cedar Row allocation next Saturday? Yes. Do you request the Holloway space under your name? For 1 second I wanted to say yes. I had grown most of what had sat beneath that canopy. I had arrived first more Saturdays than Evan had. I knew which leg of the table needed a folded square of cardboard under it. Wanting the booth did not mean I was entitled to escape the rule that made separation honest. No, I said, the joint space closes. I slid my copy of the tag across the table. Evan set the wooden one beside it. Lena closed the folder. Evan could finish his refund and apply for a later opening under his own name. I could do the same. Neither of us had priority. There was no fine, no ban, no announcement to the market. The familiar green canopy simply had no assigned square the following Saturday. Outside, Evan and I carried the empty sign frame to the loading lane. We had brought it in my truck, but he lifted his end toward his. I will take it, he said. All right. That was the whole conversation. He did not apologize. I did not ask him to. We loaded the two halves of our market equipment into separate vehicles and drove away. The following Saturday, I set a small table at the farm gate. Cedar Row would have opened at 8. At 8:15, I had sold 1 bag of beans and a woman had slowed her car long enough to read my sign without stopping. The tomatoes sat in 6 flats beneath the shade. Every one of them had a market life shorter than my pride. Mrs. Bell came at 9. She bought 1 flat for the pantry and asked whether I wanted her to tell people where I was. If they ask, I said, do not make it a rescue. She nodded as though she understood exactly what I meant. 2 more customers came before noon. I sold less than a third of what I usually moved at Cedar Row. I took sound surplus to the pantry because I chose to, not because it balanced a story. When I returned home, I entered the day's total on a clean page. It was honest, and it was small. That evening, Mara called. Cal and I have 6 crate spaces at the rotating table next week, she said. Tomatoes or mixed? Tomatoes, peppers, and beans. 6 total, your name on them. You help weight the tent, cover Cal while he unloads, and stay for breakdown. 1 week only. I understand. Do you want it? I looked at the farm gate total again. Yes. The next Saturday I arrived with 6 crates, although I could have filled 9. Mara had made room for 6. Bringing extra would have turned gratitude into the same kind of pressure I had just left. At 5:30 the loading lane was almost dark. I was used to reaching our old square without thinking, and my hands turned the steering wheel toward it before I corrected. Another vendor's blue canopy lay folded there. No one had stolen my place. It was no longer mine. Mara waved me toward the rotating table. She did not offer comfort or ask whether Evan and I had spoken. She handed me 2 iron weights and pointed to the rear legs. Cal called from his truck that he needed 5 minutes. Work arrived before belonging did, which suited me. I weighted the back legs of the tent before I opened a box. Cal arrived with sweet corn and asked me to watch his side while he moved his truck. I sold 24 ears for him and wrote the amount on his sheet, not mine. When the bell rang, My printed name sat above one row of produce. Customers did not treat it as a revolution. They asked prices. They squeezed tomatoes until I asked them not to. One man wanted a discount on peppers at 8:05 in the morning. Mara ran out of basil and sent a woman to my beans. 6 crates became 4, then 2, then an empty patch of table. The total was modest, but no one could rename it before it reached me. At noon, I swept beneath all 3 sections and helped Cal carry his baskets to storage. He checked the separate totals and said, "We will look at next week's mix on Tuesday." It was not a promise of a permanent place. It was the next honest question. The week after that, Mara needed to leave the table for 30 minutes to collect an order from her sister's farm. She handed me her sales sheet and showed me which jars were paid holds. "Initial anything you take," she said. "I will." During her break, I sold her 3 herb bundles, 2 jars, and a basket of eggplants. I kept every sale on her line. When she returned, she counted once, saw that it matched, and started serving the next customer without thanking me, as though I had donated something. She had given me work. I had done it. That was enough. Near closing, a customer asked whether I would hold 2 flats of tomatoes for the next Saturday. A month earlier, I might have said yes from habit and trusted the field to rescue me. I took her number and told her I would call Friday after the picking. Mara heard me and kept bundling herbs. The new table was changing more than the name above my produce. It was teaching me that a careful answer could still be generous. Cal sponsored me again the 3rd week. The 4th, I traded cleanup with him because his knee was swollen, and he covered my first 20 minutes the following Saturday while I fixed a loose truck strap. Each exchange had an edge and a name. None required us to become family. The 3rd week, I sold out early and stayed anyway. Cal had corn left, Mara had eggplants, and the table still needed 2 people while he brought the storage cart around. I answered questions about their prices without blending their stock into mine. At breakdown, Cal handed me the broom while he folded the legs. There was no ceremony in being trusted with an ordinary task twice. Evan called during that 4th week. "There is a fall event over in Dalton," he said. "We could do 1 booth, just for the weekend." I stood behind the rotating table with Mara's sales sheet on one side and mine on the other. "I will have coffee with you," I said. "We can talk about the late blight in the South Field. I am not sharing stock, money, orders, or a booth." He was silent long enough that I could hear a turn signal clicking in his truck. "I closed out the make good with Nia," he said. "Good. She is buying from someone else. I am sorry the account did not work." "Are you?" "Yes. I am not sorry I stopped promising for it." He breathed out. "Coffee then, not this week. Call when you are ready." That was not reconciliation. It was a door that opened only as far as both people said it did. By the 5th market week after our separation, mornings had cooled enough that I wore a canvas jacket in the loading lane. Mara had texted me the night before. 6 crate spaces, same as last week. I answered with 6, not approximately 6, and not 6 plus whatever might fit. I backed my truck to the curb before sunrise. Cal was fighting a stack of empty baskets that shifted whenever the wind reached the aisle. I steadied them with one hand and counted my crates with the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I said. Mara took the last tomato flat from the truck while I carried 2 pepper crates. We set each farm's produce beneath its own small sign. I wrote the opening count on my page. Cal moved his truck. Mara tightened the front tent strap. At the bell, a woman stopped in front of my cucumbers. "Which ones are yours?" she asked. I pointed to the labeled row, set a bag on the scale, and began weighing them.